DPRK carried out a significant cyber attack on the United States in response to a Hollywood comedy portraying a farcical assassination plot. The attack destroyed systems and stole massive quantities of personal and commercial data from Sony Pictures Entertainment, not only damaging a private sector entity, but also affecting countless Americans who work for the company. The attackers also threatened Sony's employees, actors in the film, movie theaters, and even people who dared to go to the theaters showing the movie, warning them to, quote, remember the 11th of September, end quote.
That was Ambassador Samantha Power at the UN last week. Now researchers from a private security firm say they don't believe North Korea is to be blamed based on the evidence that the FBI has made public. North Security briefed the FBI yesterday on their theory that the attack was carried out by a group of 6 people, one of whom is a disgruntled former Sony employee who had extensive knowledge of the company's network. Norse also believes some of the hackers spoke Russian, not Korean, and that some of them operated in Singapore and Canada. An FBI spokesperson responded to those reports by simply saying, attribution to North Korea is based on intelligence from the FBI, the U.S. intelligence community, DHS, foreign partners, and the private sector. It's possible that some assets outside of North Korea might have been involved, but that doesn't change the conclusion about North Korea's responsibility. Joining me now is retired Major General Brett Williams, who worked in U.S. Cyber Command at the Pentagon, and Mark Rash, a former U.S. computer crime prosecutor. General Williams, we've been talking about this for a while now, you and I, on this program. What do you make of this latest theory?
Okay, Lawrence, let me first comment on attribution in general. My experience at Cybercom was that we made a very deliberate decision. When I say we, the federal government made a very deliberate decision whether we would make attribution public or not. And more often than not, we did not make attribution public. In terms of the assessments that are made by various technical experts, I would agree. If all you have to look at is that technical data that's made public by the FBI, it would be very, very hard to attribute this particular attack based on things like IP addresses and types of malicious code. But when you really know what the capabilities are of the FBI, what the capabilities are of the intelligence agencies, and you're able to take that very sensitive intelligence and couple it with that technical data, then you can get to some pretty accurate attribution. And so, in my opinion, we would not have come out and publicly attributed this to North Korea if we didn't have the supporting intelligence that gave us great confidence in that attribution. It would not surprise me at all if there were other people outside of North Korea involved with this. There are a lot of hackers for hire in a lot of countries. So if there was somebody from Singapore or Russia or any of those other places mentioned involved, that wouldn't surprise me. But the core attribution to North Korea, in my opinion, is probably pretty solid.
General, just quickly on that point you made at the beginning about when you were doing this, public attribution was very rare. What is the case against public attribution?
Well, for example, in a very generic sense, there were times when we knew the name of the hacker, we knew what the hacker looked like. We knew what building they were working out of. We had a satellite photo. Why would we want to make that public unless there was a very good reason to make it public? We don't want anybody to know that we know what they're doing. That gives us the opportunity to monitor those activities, to provide warning in the applicable mediums that help us control that activity. So it's like any other type of intelligence activity. You don't really want to reveal sources and methods unless there's a very good reason to do it. And so that's the reason that attribution was not made public very frequently.
Mark Rash, I was hearing here in Los Angeles at the beginning of this that there was some IT layoffs at Sony in the last few months, and that there's possibilities there. And it seems to me that one question I have is, might it be possible that all of this could come together, that there could be actually some former IT employee from Sony who got somehow involved with the North Koreans on this?
It's possible, but it's unlikely that somebody who's working for Sony in the United States is going to be contacting or contacted by somebody in North Korea. You know, but I think what General Williams pointed out is the difference in philosophy between a criminal prosecutor and someone in Cyber Command. Cyber Command wants to protect its sources and methods, whereas the prosecutors want to find out who did it and bring them to justice. And there is always a conflict between those two. I think all the investigators, whether they're in Cyber Command or in the Justice Department or the FBI, need to maintain an open mind and be amenable to all new information that comes in and say, is it possible that our original assumptions were incorrect? You know, it's always possible that the NSA intercepted a communication by Kim Jong-un saying, hey, go ahead and attack these people. Yeah. The problem with keeping that stuff secret is you don't have any confidence that they got the right person.
Yeah, and Mark, what is your sense of what the likelihood could be here of any prosecutions? It would have to be someone that they found within U.S. jurisdiction in order to get a prosecution. Well,
no, you can also extradite people from Europe, from Eastern Europe, and things like that. We're never, if they're in North Korea, we're never going to get them. You know, that's pretty much a given. But if it's an insider, somebody from the United States, then there can be a prosecution, and probably will be. But the idea of the government coming to particularly within the law enforcement context, it was the North Koreans, we have classified information that shows us, trust us. That's almost to the range of USS Maddox and the Tonkin Gulf resolution. Trust us, we have the right stuff. I think that there has to be a lot more openness if you want the public's confidence in attribution. You can always have secret attribution, but if you want public confidence, you have to have more openness.
General Williams, at this stage, what would you say we have learned from this episode since so much of it has now played out? There was the North Korean, or the presumed North Korean threat on movie theaters in America. If this movie was shown in movie theaters, that turned out to not be true. There was really, in effect, there was no danger to anyone at these movie theaters. And so as you sit here tonight, what do you think the lessons of this are at this stage?
Lawrence, I'd say that there are several lessons out of this. Number one, I think that we should open our aperture in terms of what we see as potential targets to people that are willing to use cyberspace to do really nasty things, above and beyond just the theft of intellectual property or data. What we saw prosecuted against Sony was a much wider spectrum that went, in fact, beyond Sony and infected the general public. And so we have to widen our aperture in terms of who is a potential target for really serious cyber activity. The second thing is this should be another in a series of wake-up calls that we should think about what would happen if this type of a destructive attack impacted a major financial institution, impacted a key part of the energy sector, impacted the air traffic control system. As bad as it was for Sony, I would argue that an attack of this level on any of those other places would have much wider implications for the public.
Major General Brett Williams and Mark Rash, thank you both very much for joining me tonight.